and obviously it launched in October, where we found you guys and you found us guys, and it's been a joy ever since. Um, yeah, that's my intro. Does
Oh,
that work?
thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Welcome.
And I've got the recording going. Right, should we get to the first question then?
Let's do it.
So, yeah, the first question is from Cloudy Monsters, who asked, writing for Watson as an audio everyman is a unique approach. How do you balance staying true to Watson's character while also making him relatable to modern listeners?
Ooh, I guess, I kind of you do the thing of immediately trying to transpose what it's like back then, and how that would be now. Watson, even reading the stories, does feel like an everyman. You can kind of use that sweeping term. So naturally, I tried to make him sound like sort of most British people will have a friend that sort of talks and behaves like John Watson, especially millennials. Um, and then also what we tried to do was bring in essentially his work in progress that is his podcast, and I think that kind of really helps like him come across as an everyman because he's fundamentally doing a sort of DIY project that is his podcast. So just that sort of hue of amateurness makes him feel like an everyman. It doesn't necessarily, in the books, he doesn't necessarily come across as an amateur, but he does come across like he's a little bit out of his depth sometimes. Now, obviously, we've pulled that not to the extreme, but we have pulled on that thread quite strongly, because ultimately we're making a light entertainment show and which has comedy in it. So that's not necessarily what Conan Doyle was trying to do. So um, yeah, I think the way I mostly move away from the books is he's a little bit more amateur, and you're kind of on that journey with him becoming a better podcaster, becoming a better detective. Um, and yeah, I don't even know if I've even remotely answered the question there.
I think you did
Uh,
a good job.
oh, that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just speaking for me, but I think you've done a wonderful job writing him.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so our next question is from Subtle Hysteria. Um, and oh, this is quite a long one. Hi, Joel. First off, thank you so much for the brilliance that is Sherlock and Co. It's always something to look forward to during the week. Secondly, thank you for writing Sherlock as canonically autistic. I can't begin to explain how much it means to me and others in the fandom. Which leads me to my question: what inspired you to go down this route in Sherlock's characterization? Was it just an interpretation of the text, or were you perhaps influenced by something?
So yeah, so I guess I was influenced. When did I meet? I met Tony Pastor, who runs Goalhanger. I met him in the summer of. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of what year it is, but I think it was the summer of 2021. And he said he's a big Sherlock Holmes fan, and he said you should really, do this show with us. I've got an idea. It's Watson's a True Crime podcaster, etc. So I did. I did a first draft of the script, and then in November of that year, my eldest daughter, when she was 2, nearly 3, was diagnosed with autism. And because I'm, all parents are kind of worriers anyway, but obviously when it's your first, you worry even more. So all I was doing basically was either reading books about autism or reading Sherlock Holmes stories. And I think, um, I don't, I don't know what Conan Doyle intended, but when you are when you are reading and learning about autism and then you read Sherlock Holmes, it's really, really difficult to untangle Sherlock himself from autism, in my opinion. Um, so basically, I did the second draft of the script, and I messaged Tony and basically was like, "This is sort of what's going on with me at the moment." And I can't unsee Sherlock being autistic anymore because I know more about autism. So then Gohang was sort of fine with it, really. They were like, yeah, that's good. I didn't really. I know he mentions obviously ASD and a number of other things that he feels that the DSM would sort of say that he has. We didn't really like shout the word, or I don't think we have. We haven't shouted the word autism, autism, autism over and over again. We don't really. No, we're not totally loud about it, and that's mostly because a producer called John at Goalhanger, when he was listening to it, really, and I think he had his understanding of autism, basically said that he really liked how it felt sort of neurodivergent coded rather than sort of in your face. And that is kind of the majority of the emails we get, to be honest. A lot of the time, of people excited that they picked up on things and excited that Sherlock is like them and excited about, Watson said and did the right thing for an autistic person in the way they were feeling that day. So it's it's a very personal thing to me, but obviously I'm neurotypical, so I don't really, I never feel that like I like what I'm doing because I feel like this is a little homage to my daughter, but I never really feel totally in control of those neurodivergent traits. So it's always it's a great thing to read and hear from people that I've done it right and Harry's done it right and Adam's done the right job picking the right take that feels like it is accurate but also fair, because as we know, portrayals can be unfair a lot of the time. So yeah, that's the story. It's basically me sort of learning on the job as a dad with my daughter, who's now 5. She's mostly non-verbal. She almost definitely has ADD as well, but in the UK you can't really get diagnosed with that until you're about 6 or 7. So yeah, that's why Sherlock is neurodiverse, basically.
That's very sweet. Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say something. Someone who's in the fandom, and it gets talked about a lot, and I think a general consensus is, yeah, you're doing an absolutely amazing job, and I think it's a really great thing, because in other adaptations, Sherlock doesn't really get adapted
Yeah.
that way, and I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. We're very proud
Um.
of it. And also, I
Great.
should say this isn't not sucking up or anything, but like when you read about it, the autistic mind is a really amazing thing. So it would be, even if I was even if I was cruel and stupid and just wanted to do an adaptation my own way, it would be much more boring if Sherlock was not neurodiverse, just because the very nature of how our brains work, it's more interesting when you really dive into autism and ADD. So yeah, it would have been a stupid idea to not have him that way, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Third question is from Joff.
Oh no, that's a joke, Joff.
Oh, they're everywhere. Okay. The offensive went on for 5 years. Sorry, the offensive went on for 5 years and was your constant, as it was for Paul and Adam. Does Sherlock and Co. feel anything like that constant that you had with the offensive?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely. I'd say the offensive was uh the offensive was more rushed, I would say. Because these stories are already there in literature, we can sort of plans kind of 4, 5, or 6 weeks ahead and go, oh, that's definitely a 2-parter, that's going to be a 3-parter, and um this person can play that character. The offensive was was a really rushed show. It was written on the Tuesday, recorded on the Wednesday and Thursday, and Adam would edit it on the Friday, and it would be out on the Monday. So this one definitely feels like a constant, and it obviously has stressful moments, but it's not the same level of unease and flying by the seat of our pants. I should also say the offensive was tied to a football season, so it has an off season, obviously, so it had a break, sort of 2 months off. which we won't be doing with this. So there's no break. But at least I'm a co-writer in a sense, because Conan Doyle has done the plots and the story. So there's not that same pressure as a writer going, what on earth is going to happen this week? Because I've got the good man from 130 years ago sorted it all out for us. So yeah, it does definitely feel like a constant. And also, like I say, Adam is obviously he's the guy that I work with on it, but he's also my best friend. So we speak to each other all the time. And that helps that feeling of constantness, I suppose. Does that answer your question, Joff? Does it?
Oh, I don't think Jeff is here, sadly, but I hope it
I
will.
think he's at a gig. I think.
Oh,
Oh no, he
no.
said yes.
They are. Oh, welcome. But yeah, no, I don't think anyone can survive a break of Sherlock and Co, right?
No, definitely not. I don't know. I'd have to go into hiding or something, change my address.
Jesus, yeah. But all with good intent. All right.
Of course.
Next question is from Andrea. Adaptation isn't easy. What goes into your adaptation process? How do you pick what themes and other elements, and how do you expand on them?
Usually, and I apologize because I've said this before in an interview. First off, I'll sort of strip out the Victorian Edwardianness, which can often be this rich bloke has got a problem with his wife, or whatever. It will often be based around kind of vast wealth. So generally, I'll try and normalize it a little bit, and then kind of bring in modern day themes, particularly in terms of relationships, in terms of conflict and media, things that feel really prominent today. I suppose Solitary Cyclist is probably the best example of that. Feels like a very modern form of coercion, of abuse. And then if you juxtapose it, if you actually look at the original story, it's probably the most kind of Edwardian feeling story you could possibly imagine. With the woman is basically treated like property, and whoever gets to marry her first wins. So generally, I'm looking at, I can't remember who said it to me, but obviously Sherlock Holmes was immensely popular at the time because it pulled on the heartstrings of people because of the modern themes. So we're doing the same thing, really. We're finding what is the modern day version of this situation. And then I'll often look at streamlining characters is a big one. Conan Doyle likes a lot of characters, and for audio drama that's a bit tricky, just because people are, of course, they're concentrating listening, but you can lose track and you can sort of wonder who's talking now. And then I'll sort of look at notes on my phone of kind of good ideas I've had for things, and I'll see if I can merge the two worlds. Like I want to do something about a cult, so then I kind of worked that into Pantsnay. Adam and I found the idea of Red-Headed League, of him being a bad actor, really funny to the point of where we were just like, oh god, let's just do it. So it's often like those things. Like once I'm done with the modernizing and the stripping back of the characters, I'll think, have I actually got any ideas myself where I can kind of mash them together with Conan Doyle's ones and see if they work. So yeah, that's kind of the process, really. But it's fun to do. Like I say, it feels a lot less pressure than coming up with stuff entirely, from a blank page.
Yeah. And obviously in your adaptation you have, well, sort of a new character. There's Mariana, obviously. There is,
Yeah.
yeah, she's called Mrs. Hudson in the beginning by Sherlock, but she is well, it seems a completely different character. And what was the thought process, and how did you come up with her? And this question is by Crow.
Crow, yeah. Mrs. Hudson was always going to be there, and then it was in the writing of Illustrious Client Part 3. And it felt really fun for her to sort of be involved in the crime solving. Really, I know she didn't technically solve it, but I just mean like receiving the money and not knowing what to do with it, and it just felt, the dynamic just felt quite nice. And to be honest, it's helped massively by the fact that Marta da Silva's really good, really nice, and really fun to work with. So there's that feeling of, I don't have to second guess it if I think, oh, Mariana would really work in this scene. I know that Marta would nail it, obviously, but also find time for the recording of it. So she kind of found her way into the show. It wasn't, I could be wrong here, but it wasn't a grand plan. I think if you had tapped me on the shoulder in 6 months before the show had launched and said that Mariana was going to be helping them solve cases, by episode 12, 13, 14, I would have been a bit surprised. So I think it's just been an organic thing where, in the offensive we had 3 leads, 2 male, 1 female, and it was a nice dynamic. And I think we're kind of repeating that trick, and it just feels right, I suppose. We can't have a modern day Mrs. Hudson because, I don't think 2 blokes living by themselves should have a housekeeper. And it would be weird if they did. So yeah, it's been a really organic thing, and I'm really pleased with it. I think she's great. I'm a big fan of Mariana, actually.
Yeah, me too. I love her. And yeah, no, Marna's very, very talented. She's an amazing character. Right. Let's have another question. This is by Rory. Rory or Pigeon Tracks. With the change of fan base from The Offensive and other podcasts you've done, how does it feel to have a fan base made up of creatives and it being so popular and making art and writings and and that sort of stuff based on the podcast?
It's amazing. To be honest, it's probably the first thing we'll sort of show off to people, when they ask about the show, whether that sort of be relatives or friends or whatever. I'll go, yeah, it's going great, and I'll sort of get my phone out and go, look at these things that people have made. It's really surprising because it's not like, obviously I realize Adam and I are creatives, but not necessarily in the same department really, as particularly illustrators. So it almost feels like I don't know. It always feels like you've won a competition. Do you know what I mean? And people have just decided that now people are going to start drawing your stuff. So it feels great in that sense. I noticed someone on Twitter the other day was sort of talking about there's this strange thing that's happened where people have kind of decided what the characters look like, which I kind of noticed as well. It kind of took a couple of months to happen. I think Jones was the first one to do Watson as well. Actually, Jones was the first person to do any art on the show, and he made Watson blonde. And then he's kind of got this sort of, I hope this is an offensive word, he's got this kind of like bimbo energy about him visually, which I just think is so good. There's somebody called Noodles as well that does a John Watson that when I look at him, now that I've kind of been influenced by the fan base as well, I just think, wow, they've nailed him. That is him there. So yeah, it feels amazing. But I'm like everybody else. I'm completely kind of sucked in to, I look out for certain people to see what they've done. Somebody did a really good, actually 2 people did a really good Watson with a sledgehammer, and it's just, yeah, so now I'm just sort of like looking out for it because it feels like such a treat, such a blessing really. And it is, like you say, it's the polar opposite to the offensive audience, who are, they were great, but they're, kind of older football fans, who weren't, they were never going to draw. I don't think we had a single picture in 5 years and nearly 200 episodes, I don't think we had a single illustration of any of our main characters in that. So yeah, it's great. It really is amazing. It's like I say, the biggest testament to how much we love it is it's probably the first thing we'll show off to people, is what the fan base are capable of in terms of making and illustrating and stuff like that. It's great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, all the fan art and stuff, it's amazing. And yeah, I think it's really cool, as you said, that we kind of came up with how they looked, and I thought that was really cool.
It's funny, isn't it? And I know, I know that obviously Harry and Paul are big fans, but Marta and I will. Most of our WhatsApp chat is just sending the latest Mariana image that's landed on Twitter. We'll just sort of send it back and forth. So yeah, it is great. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right. So our next question is from Romy. And Romy says, how did you get into the whole audio drama thing?
Oh, and also thank you, Romy, for directing me out of the voice chat room that I was in earlier by accident. How did I get into audio drama? So Adam and I have been I wouldn't call it working because we don't get paid for it, but we would write and direct together. Just kind of sort of sounds a bit cruel, but amateurish stuff for years, and I eventually, because I worked in TV, but I worked in live sport. I tried to reach out to other departments of TV to get The Offensive made before I'd done it as an audio drama, to get it made as a TV show. TV is really, really slow at the best of times, but when you've got a show like The Offensive, highly unlikely that's going to get made. So then Adam was doing a podcast where he interviewed actors, and I basically asked him, do you think The Offensive could be a podcast? And then we made the show that summer. And as soon as we started making it, we realized that, your budgets are completely, this is so boring, but your budgets are really manageable. You don't have to spend a load of money because of the visuals of it. So then I guess our imaginations grew, our kind of, the scope of what we wanted to do was growing. And then we kind of just developed a reputation in the field of being good at it, basically. And that's where we are. That's where we currently live. There's lots of people will sometimes be at like a podcasting event, or will be interviewed by podcasting magazines and stuff like that think we absolutely adore podcasts, and we don't. It's just, this is the medium that works for us, and that I think we've really found good form in, and we found like a skill level that works for it. But yeah, this is where we currently are. But we would never limit ourselves to just audio drama. But it is a fun place to be, and you can hire people from all over the world. I mean, as you know, Watson is played by Paul Waggett, and he lives in New Zealand. So obviously, if this was visual, it would immediately be impossible. So yeah, it was kind of just a decision made 6 years ago, I suppose, of trying something out in The Offensive, and that's where we are.
Yeah, thank you. And talking about this whole podcasting thing, and so with the fandom, obviously after a while you started a Patreon and then a Patreon Discord. And how did you come up with that, and how are you experiencing all of that so far?
It's great. Yeah, we really like it. The Patreon, we kind of knew, I would say maybe 3 weeks into the show's launch, we realized that we were developing a fandom that were a bit different from, say, Jackie the Ripper and Boom, which is people that wanted more, and right now. So we immediately started thinking about websites and patrons and stuff like that, but also audio drama doesn't bring in tons of money because it doesn't lend itself to sponsorship. So there was always going to be something that we could offer additionally. The Discord is it's consistently a hilarious place to be. um, and again, in terms of Goal Hanger production chats, we'll often kind of share things back and forth that we find amusing and terrifying. That's a joke. So yeah, I think it's really really great. And we've started even to have fan mail trickle through. Adam and I are heading to Goal Hanger on Wednesday, so we're going to go and look at all the bits. So yeah, it's great.
No, I totally agree. It's an awesome thing. So the next one is from Red/Ear Defenders. Yeah. How do you manage to do Twitter and Discord and keep up with the characters and stay in character? Is it all you? If it is, how do you manage your time? As from my perspective, that would be a huge commitment.
Time management right now is a little bit rubbish because we're just about to release a 4-parter in Silver Blaze, so naturally, getting all those ready and sorted for Tuesday. But then the second that that's released, we can kind of have more time to enjoy, the other sides of the show, and the Discord's kind of included in that. We learnt lessons from the offensive in that you got to kind of remember what you've said a character is like or does, or their favorite thing, or the thing that they did back in 1995 or whatever. So John has started to share a few things with me just because it's easier to keep track of. And I know that sounds really lazy. Like, he shares my birthday and my age. Sharing my birthday is fine because that's Arthur Conan Doyle's birthday anyway. So I kind of feel that's like a little nod to the overall creator. But yeah, I suppose Watson lines up with me a bit. I hope he's a bit dorkier than me. I think he's probably nicer than me. He's probably more like Paul Waggett in that respect. Paul's really, really nice guy. So he's probably a little bit like me and Paul, and I probably kept it that way just to keep track of his kind of traits, his likes, his dislikes. Like I say, his birthday. Just because I'm not organized enough to keep these things noted down. Yeah, so there's a weird meshing of worlds, but I do like that he still feels like a different person, if you know what I mean. I think it would
Mhm.
be a bit if it was just, oh look, there's Joel, Joel and Sherlock Holmes. So I do like that he has morphed into this different person.
And I'm just gonna say something because I talked about this a lot with other people in the fandom, and we think it's very great that you're interacting a lot with the fandom and with those liking stuff, but like answering emails and answering Discord things and doing this, and I just think that's really amazing, and I don't think a lot of a lot of creators do that, and that could be because it's very big, but yeah, I think everyone very much appreciates that.
Oh, thanks, Butler. I appreciate it. And you've just reminded me by saying emails. You've reminded me how far behind we are with Watson replying to people's emails. But yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Generally, if I give somebody, or Watson gives somebody a shout out from an email, um, even if they haven't asked for one, that's Watson's way of saying sorry, I didn't reply. Um, so yeah, no, it's honestly it's a pleasure to do it.
All right, moving on to the next question, and we got this one a lot. And in the first episode, Sherlock diagnoses himself with a lot of. Sherlock says he has a lot of different diagnoses. He also mentions DID. Does he have DID?
I think so. This was kind of explored. This was kind of explored in Gloria Scott, and we kind of talked about this passage quite a lot, in that Sherlock says, according to the DSM, and I think that is Sherlock's way of saying, basically, this is what society or the medical community think of me. That's not necessarily him saying he has DID, because to live with that would be quite a constant interruption to your life, and obviously has quite severe bouts. But on the other hand, Sherlock has a real mental hurdle that he has to take in terms of, his identity. So it was one of those things where it sounds like we're kind of hiding behind the according to the DSM, but it also says a lot about Sherlock's character. We think that he's kind of got that begrudging attitude of diagnoses. I think it was Coat that messaged me on Twitter, and we kind of had this discussion, and I sort of said, I don't think that Sherlock himself is formally diagnosed with anything. I don't think he pays it a great deal of attention. I think he knows who he is and knows what he has to deal with in terms of a neurotypical world, and that is simply it. I think he probably tried up to his kind of mid-teens to try and keep up with, quote unquote, the normies, and then was a bit like, I can't be bothered, and just went his own way. So I think yeah, that part of according to the DSM is kind of his way of saying, don't judge a book by its cover a bit, but also knowing deep down that he has these kind of struggles, if you can call them
that. Right. Another one. How did you come up with Archie?
That was Adam that wanted to call him Archie. I think, as well as being Archibald, it's also a nickname for Arthur. So it was kind of our little nod to Conan Doyle. I would imagine we also considered the name Conan. I can't quite remember. And then we were kind of throwing around the idea of the breed for a while. I used to have a French bulldog called Bilbo, who died unfortunately a year ago. And after that, having a dog that's related to a bulldog, I think we were kind of happy with him going into the show. But also audio drama, bulldogs do sound hilarious. So yeah, that was Archie. Again, a little bit like Mariana. It was probably one of those things where I didn't really, at the start of this, didn't really think that he would be that involved in their day-to-day life. Obviously, he can't make it on the adventures for now. So yeah, I will credit Adam with Archie, the name. Yeah.
And then this one we also got quite a lot. And it's just, what is your favorite Sherlock Holmes story?
It was Silver Blaze. It probably still is, but obviously I've had my head buried so deeply in it. Oh, I don't know. It's probably Silver Blaze. I do really like Scandal in Bohemia. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Silver Blaze as my favorite still. But some of them I've only read once, and I obviously get to revisit them when we consider making them. I reread Norwood Builder recently. I thought that was great. That went right up in my estimations. I don't know what I was doing the first time around I read it. Yeah, let's go Silver Blaze. Sorry, that's a boring answer because it's out on Tuesday and it sounds like I'm plugging it. But yeah, Silver Blaze, I think.
Oh, I also quite like Silver Blaze. I'm very excited for it. I loved the trailer, by the way. I don't know who made it, but it was amazing.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? Yeah, we're excited for Silver Blaze.
Yeah. And talking about favorites, do you have this is from Lizard Trash. Do you have a favorite moment from the podcast, and if so, what is it?
There's lots. I think we found Jabez Wilson really, really funny. We'll often kind of share his lines, we being me and Adam. Um, obviously, the microphone going up, Heather was enjoyable. This is so stupid. I think it's in Noble Bachelor, but there's a line, it's barely a line, where Sherlock goes, "Good God," and just the way Harry did the take has now that way of saying "Good God" has just made its way into the way Adam and I speak to each other. So we'll quite often say "Good God." I think it's Noble Bachelor, so that might be a favourite moment. Hearing Paul physically struggling is always funny. There's a bit in Golden Pince-Nez where Watson is trying to put on the CSI overalls in the back of a car, and he's making struggling noises. That's always enjoyable. Oh no, I've given too many things here, and now I'm getting too excited. You just want one answer. God, I don't know.
You don't have to give one answer. I think there's a lot of good moments. So.
Oh, thank you. Let me try and think if I can pick out one that we really like. It's so stupid, isn't it? But I'm gonna have to go with Good God. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I'll go with Good God. I think it's in Noble Bachelor.
All right. Yeah. And then these questions we got a lot, and I don't know how much you can answer since it does surround future episodes. But will we get Minecraft at some point?
Yeah, you'll get everybody. Yeah, you'll get all the big ones. I say everybody. You'll get all the main ones definitely. So I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but we're kind of taking it in stages, and the first stage is basically coming to. There's not going to be a break in the show, don't worry. But the first stage is kind of coming to an end in that the boys, Sherlock and Watson, haven't really properly left London yet. Now they did. Obviously, Pince-Nez was in Kent, I think, which is not far from London, and also they were back basically the same night. And Solitary Cyclist was in Surrey, which is essentially, the doorstep of London, and they were still going back home. Silver, because we wanted to save that for Silver Blaze. We wanted to get the feel of them going and staying in an Airbnb for a few days and that kind of thing. So then we knew that we couldn't kind of leave London in that time, and we also knew that we didn't want to bring in the Lestrades and the Mycrofts until we were kind of out of that first phase of Watson kind of getting his footing a bit, trying to understand what it's like to work with this detective and stuff like that. So now as we move into our second phase, I can't guarantee that Mycroft is part of the plans for the immediate future. He's obviously definitely going to be in the show. But yeah, everybody's planned out. It's really difficult to land. I know a few people noticed I did an interview for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere where we were sort of talking about landing, established talent to be the voices of those people, those characters. It's really hard to land these people. It's really hard to work with agents. They do want a lot, and I don't just mean money, just in terms of media rights, image rights, what we can say in terms of promoting the show with these people attached to them. So we're kind of reevaluating whether we just find a really bloody good actor to be these people, and whether actually a famous name is even worth it anyway. So that's kind of been the reason, is that first of all we wanted that first phase of just our gang in London, and yeah, and just kind of fighting our corner as best we can as an independent production company. to get the right talent on board. But yeah, I promise they will all be there, all the big ones.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm sure all of us are looking forward to it. Right. This one I haven't got a name for, but you've tweaked a lot with the genders and characteristics of certain characters, like Lestrade being a woman, for example. How did you come up with that, and or why are you doing that?
Why are we doing that? So when did it first? First thing we did was, so the problem of Thor Bridge. I found it really, the books. He doesn't really allude to it in the story, but it's quite tragic. The woman taking her life on the bridge. And no no offense to the men out there, I changed it to a man, probably just because personally I was a bit like, wow, that is bleak stuff. And also in that same adventure, and I liked the name Grace as well, for like this big sort of urban guy. So I guess we were kind of happy with that, but we always knew Lestrade was going to be a woman. We had we had Jennifer Tierney play our chief of police, essentially, for Jackie the Ripper, and we were really happy with that. And also, but it reflected London at the time. So London has had a chief of police as a woman for, I think Cressida Dick was maybe the police commissioner for nearly 15 years. So it felt right that a sort of senior ranking police officer and somebody like Lestrade would be a woman. It didn't really feel like we were doing anything kind of that progressive. So yeah, it was just something that kind of fit, and we liked the idea. I think, we haven't met her yet. I sort of already like the dynamic before we've even heard it. And obviously, we've, instead of John Straker being murdered in Silver Blaze, we've gone with June Straker. It's also one of those things for audio, it's like it's as John Watson would say, attention spans, the tricky things, troublesome beasts. So just breaking things up and not making it, oh, not this bloke, the other bloke, and that bloke, and this bloke. It's a really handy little device every now and again to just kind of separate things a bit and cause a little bit more recognition in the listener's head, really. So, we like it. Everyone else seems to like it when we do gender bend, but also I do think it's an effective way of storytelling anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's awesome. Keeping on the theme with characters. Oh, give me 1 second.
No worries.
To find who sent this question. Oh, I can't quite find who sent the question, but I will look for it later and maybe I will say it. But the question was, keeping with the characters, but the fandom has characterized a lot of characters a bit on their own, and decided a bit like what they look like and made jokes and stuff. Does any of that influence your writing the characters?
I don't know. I suppose we often, Adam and I will, I mean, the phone calls we could measure in days probably, of how we've talked about the kind of tightrope that we're walking in terms of balancing our audience. So we've got that kind of, you know, male millennial audience that have followed us from the offensive. We've then got the goal hanger audience, which is basically people listening to, you know, talk shows about science and politics, and then we've got our new audience. I would say our new audience is a lot more compassionate, and the other two are much more cynical. And a lot of the time, we're just trying to get, especially with Watson, trying to get that balance right of, you know, if he goes, if he goes sort of overly compassionate, then we worry that that other audience starts to think, oh, this isn't this character dynamic that I sort of used to like has kind of changed a bit. And vice versa, you know, if Watson starts becoming really kind of cynical and spiky and making satirical comments about the government and stuff like that, it kind of it would kind of, you know, it would isolate an audience off, and we don't really want to do that. We're kind of walking this sort of steady balance. I suppose kind of going back to the neurodivergent thing, it the biggest thing that I've got back from the audience has been that the neurodivergence of Sherlock is really appreciated and it's handled in the right way. So keep doing it, basically, is what that has probably been the biggest influence. I wonder sometimes if we had heard nothing, if nobody had reached out and said, you know, I'm autistic, or my sister's autistic, or my son's autistic, and I thank you for blah blah blah. If no one had reached out, would we have, you know, would we have shied away from or toned down Sherlock's sort of stims and hyperfixations and things like that? I don't know. So that's the one where I think that the audience has definitely had an effect on the show in just sort of giving us a pat on the back and saying keep walking in this direction because we really like it. So yeah, probably that.
Yeah, and I found that question was actually also from Joff. So
Damn it, Joff.
yeah. Right. And then one last question about the characters, I think. How would you describe John and Sherlock's relationship with each other? This one is from Comet/Azzy.
Relationship with each other. I think I think like John didn't realize it at the time, but he met Sherlock at a point in his life where he really, really needed something to latch onto. And Sherlock as a person just makes himself such a perfect fit because it gives John some self-worth. Because he does, you know, they are kind of that yin and yang fit for one another. And I don't mean that in a kind of opposites attract kind of way. I kind of mean like as puzzle pieces, they kind of slot together in that John helps Sherlock in areas of, you know, in blind spots and things like that, and vice versa. I do think they're definitely best friends. I I can't remember whether this is in a script or this is a line that I intended to write or I said it in an interview or something. Or maybe he said it, maybe John said it in a Q&A, which was that he'd always thought of himself as not a serious person, so he went and did a serious job. And I don't think he gave the army a proper he didn't really analyze why he was doing it. I've always been like kind of fascinated by that thing of like people doing what their deceased parents did for a living. I think my dad did the same thing. Like he went to one university and wanted to be like a physicist or something, and then his dad died, who was an accountant, and my dad's an accountant. And I've always kind of been fascinated by that. And I think Watson went and did that, and now he's at a complete loss, and he's found this person that does not sit there wondering what he wants to do with his life. So that he's completely drawn to him in a kind of like magnetic kind of way. And then I think so they need each other in a sense, but then I also think they're probably best friends as well. Yeah, I think they're probably by Blue Carbuncle. I think they were best mates. I'd say. Yeah, best mates that need each other. And to be honest, I'd say that Mariana will be a co-best mate as well to both of them. Just because that she doesn't really feel, I know how a third person, male or female, can feel like they're kind of intruding or stepping on the footsteps of certain friendships, but it's never really felt like that. So, yeah, that is how I kind of assess the dynamic, really.
That was very nice. Yeah, no, they have a very beautiful friendship in the podcast. I love it. Now moving on. This is from Daemon Breath. How do you pick which case to adapt? Have you already mapped out an order? Do you spin a wheel, or does Goalhanger decide?
So Tony at Goalhanger, he'd love to decide. He doesn't. He basically said, do Blue Carbuncle this Christmas. You have to do it. So we were like, okay, fine. We were kind of saving it because it's a classic. And we're very aware that we're a long running show at the end of the day. So so that was an example of Goalhanger getting their way. Going back to kind of what I said about phases, immediately there's a lot of adventures that are off limits. Because we wanted to be in London and we knew that we weren't going to have our Mycroft and our Lestrade yet. So we're kind of picking certain ones. And then, no disrespect to Conan Doyle, a lot of the stories can be similar. Now, that's fine because he wrote them over about 35 years. So that doesn't really make much of a difference. But you kind of want to make sure that you've got a good gap between types of stories. Adam and I always talk about palette cleansers. So big adventure, then a palette cleanser. What ended up happening, Gloria Scott, for example, was supposed to be a palette cleanser after Red-Headed League. And that ended up being like the dirtiest palette of all because it had so much angst in it. And then Solitary Cyclist, I think, didn't do anyone any favors because that had a lot of distress in it as well. So we keep kind of envisaging what stories could be, and they end up, coming out sort of slightly different. Like we're still pleased with it, but there's always like these. They have like a little edge to them, which I think in a few years' time we'll look back on and be very proud of. But in the moment, sometimes you just want to completely change the gear a little bit, change the speed. So essentially, yeah, I'm looking for type of story, and if I find a type of a story that I feel like we haven't done or haven't done for a while, and it fits within the parameters of, oh, it's in London, there's no sort of special characters in it, then we'll do it. We have, I'm going to be careful what I say here because I don't want to give stuff away. Adam and I have bookmarked when some big blockbuster adventures will be in terms of in a calendar. And that's about it, really. Everything else is kind of finding our way as we go and getting getting the balance right, making sure that the stories feel nice and diverse from one adventure to the next. So there is a decision-making process, but the decision-making begins with, right, what can't we do? And it's usually there's a good, 30 stories that we're not ready for or not right for the moment. And yeah, I hope that answers the question. That was a bit rambly, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was great. And we only have a bit of time left, so we have two more questions. This first one, we don't have a name, and it's just how far in advance do you write and record episodes?
Oh, it's pretty wild. It's so we launched with 10 in the bag, in the can, as it were. And now, I mean, we don't have. I've started to get the next adventure after Silver Blaze down on paper. So not on paper, but on the screen. So right now we've got a buffer zone of 4 weeks, which isn't great. It can put the pressure on a little bit. It's been worse. I won't give too much away, but we've definitely had it a little bit tighter than that. But like the big adventures and especially the classics will really buy us some time. Like when a 3-week adventure drops and when this 4-week adventure drops, it really allows us to regroup and get another 2 adventures down. Paul and Harry and Marta are really good at getting lines over. They can read the room, as it were, in terms of that it needs to be done quickly and got over to us. So yeah, the buffer is 4 weeks. Generally speaking, we don't want to go too much less than that. It might drop down to 2 every now and again. And we'll try and build it up to about like 6 weeks. 6 weeks is the ideal. If I was really, really organized, it would be 6 weeks. Would be the buffer.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. This is the last question. This is by Coat. There have been hundreds of Sherlock Holmes adaptations. What do you want yours to be remembered for?
We definitely want to be the one that did all of them. And I think we want to be the enjoyable, light entertainment one. I think comedy is kind of our happy place. Obviously, we don't want to overstep the mark and, you know, not do the original story justice just by trying to make it funny. But I think, yeah, doing all of them is a big thing that we would be proud of. And not just sort of like, mashing together a few stories into one longer story. But also being upbeat most of the time, happy most of the time, and enjoyable most of the time. I think that would be a favorite approach to it. Otherwise, I suppose giving John the voice again. A lot of adaptations don't do that. I understand why, because a lot of the time they're on screen and you can't necessarily have a narrator and central character. So yeah, having John actually put the show together, I think, is also something we'd like to have. As they were the ones that did that. Yeah, I think those are probably the things.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and doing this, and thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Bottler. Thank you for arranging this. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for listening to this. Oh, no, I've opened the chat again. Oh, no. Look at that mess. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want to do something like this, I'm up for it. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.